Welcome back to the JaiRell experience with Jai Matthews.
And Tyrell Carli.
Today, sponsored by mybraincells.cf. Amazing jokes.
I know. You can say that again.
Now, Tyrell, would you like to explain what we're doing today?
Alright, so today we are comparing two stories for both of us. So I'll be comparing In Order to Live and 1984, and Jai will be comparing...
I'll be comparing The History of Bees and Hated in the Nation.
Nice.
So let's just get right into it.
Yeah.
So, for me, The History of Bees is basically a novel about three separate stories. One involving William, George, and Tao. I'll probably only be focusing on Tao.
As I said earlier, it's down.
Yeah, I'll probably only be focusing on Tao for now. And her story is essentially taking place in about 80 years.
Are they still communist in China?
In China, I don't know.
Or did they, like... Well, they're not really communist now, but they go under, like, this weird, like... And they have, like, state capitalism.
No, they're not.
It's kind of weird.
Okay. No, I don't think they're communist. Anyway,
Alright.
The point is, she exists in a world without bees, so she has to pollinate trees herself amongst...
I would have thought that was a male name.
Amongst countless other slaves. Well, not slaves, but very...
Well, China's kind of like that, so what do you expect?
Yeah, so that's
China's always been really like that, to be honest.
That's what happens in The History of Bees. Hated in the Nation, the other thing I'm talking about, is a Black Mirror episode which is about a world where there are no bees, but instead these ADIs that fly around and pollinate flowers for you. And it's kind of scary because these ADIs can be hacked and used to kill people. And there's this guy...
Nice.
Yeah, there's this guy who uses
Nice.
them...
How much?
Shush. There's this guy who uses them to basically... it's a long story, but he's trying to prevent social media cancel culture. Anyway, both of these talk about colony collapse disorder, which is where bees die.
Nice.
Just off of the Wikipedia page, it occurs when a majority of worker bees and honeybee colony disappear, leaving behind a queen, food, and a few nurses. It's a thing. We don't know what causes it, but oh well. They talk about it quite a lot in History of Bees. Like, there are a number of things I could read to you, but I won't waste your time.
Read one.
And then there's Hated in the Nation, which talks about it momentarily at around about the half-hour mark. When the guy who runs...
How long's that the episode?
Hated in the Nation is 90 minutes.
That's a movie.
Yeah, it is pretty much a film.
But then it's a TV show movie.
Yeah, a lot of the episodes are shorter. This one's 90 minutes. Anyway,
Yeah.
There's a guy who says, colony collapse disorder. We still don't know what's behind it. Bees themselves are virtually extinct. So what our ADIs do is effectively stand in for them. So that's basically the premise of the story. Anyway, both talk about colony collapse, but The History of Bees leans into it far more because it's a novel.
No, I tried watching 1984. It just was very weird.
And also...
Oh, not 1984, sorry. What was
Black
it?
Mirror.
Black Mirror, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 1984 was also a very weird movie to watch.
We can talk about that after the podcast.
Alright.
Anyway, so The History of Bees leans into it far more because they're far more central to the story. Now, in terms of themes throughout the text, both of them have bees as a theme, but they also have a set of their own themes. So The History of Bees has the relationship between bees and humans, and then humans and the planet. It's very calming and serene with a lot of nature. It focuses a lot on family and the relationship between parent and child. It has the ideas of hope and positivity. In fact, I might as well read you the last sentence in the book, which is, eyes peering up at a bright blue sky were associated with a single word, a single unifying feeling, hope, which is very emblematic of the book as a whole.
Whose story was that?
That was in Tao's story, which is kind of the main one. And yeah, so essentially that's kind of what The History of Bees is all about in terms of its themes. But then you've got Hated in the Nation, which is completely different. So its central themes are cancel culture and mob mentality. It talks a lot about the futility of cancel culture. For example, when there's this character called Joe Powers who just watches hate mail come in
Joe Mama.
whilst happy music plays to show that she really doesn't care. But then there's also this woman who received some hate mail and actually tried to take her own life. Quote from her from the episode, suddenly there's a million invisible people all talking about how they despise you. It's like a mental illness. So you really feel sorry for that character because it's severe. And it also talks a lot about intention versus effect when people are actually online being hating. One of the characters that uses social media for this purpose uses the line, "It's not real, it's just a joke thing." And through the bees, interestingly, they also touch on themes of surveillance technology, and I guess that kind of links to our real world and how, the government has been called out on things like that. Anyway, the format of the text also interested me in terms of how you compare them. Obviously, one's a novel and one's a short film. So with the novel, you can kind of tell the story over a longer period of time. You can focus on the pacing, and it's different, whilst in a film it's a lot quicker. And because of that, the novel's just in general kind of slower. There's also an interesting idea about perspective. So the novel is written from first person, obviously, which means everything that's going on is told through the eyes of the main character, and thus the story reflects the tone of the personality of the main character. Whilst Hated in the Nation is more objective and third person, which means the tone matches not the characters but the world. That said, it is interesting to note that Hated in the Nation is told kind of through the perspective of its lead, Karen. But
Karen?
Yeah. But that is debatable.
So there's like this entitled person.
No, they're not. It's not a Karen. Just the name's Karen. Anyway. So yeah, that really shows that one of them is.
Now people shouldn't really use the name Karen anymore.
Yeah, it's written before that. So that really shows that one of the stories is very bleak, whilst the other is quite hopeful in that sort of way. Now, the history of bees, I have mentioned before, it's kind of very calming, I guess. And you can see this throughout all the stories in some admittedly weird ways. So, for example, in George's story, it has a lot of sad moments, but it still manages to resolve them quite well.
Who's George?
George is the person from the present day.
Nice.
I won't go into his story. Anyway, at the very end, he basically has a suicide attempt. And here's the line from it. "My fingers clutched the veil, the thin fabric against the heavy gloves, lifted it. Now." And then a few lines that I skipped over. "The cries became louder, piercing through the air. Dad? Dad!" He's been rescued by his son, obviously. And that is why it still manages to be a hopeful story. Tao's story is also interesting in that it manages to remain calm, despite the fact that it's in a post-apocalyptic city for a lot of it. It still manages to be calm and serene, and instead of focusing on the severity of the situation, they focus on the quietness of the city throughout the text. And William's story is also very sad. Even in the opening scene, he's bedridden due to illness and depression, but that still plays into the calmness because sadness is often correlated with calmness. This differs a lot from Hated in the Nation, which has some much bleaker concepts. So, for example, death is very prominent in the story. You see a lot of characters die, and at the very end of the book, film,
death's only natural.
At the very end of the story, thousands of people die. It also touches on some darker themes, for example, mental health and surveillance states, and does something that History of Bees doesn't. It has a bad ending. The bad guy gets away with it, and a lot of people die. And through its highly flawed characters, you really get to see, oh god, the world's a bad place. So they are very different tonally, but it's really interesting because they both still work with the bees. The idea of bees still connects to both stories, despite the fact that they're completely opposite. It's interesting being able to compare them in such a way. So both of them are able to warn about colony collapse, which is very interesting, but it's fair to say the History of Bees probably does it a bit more exhaustively, you could say, but that could be because it's a novel and that it's allowed to be longer. Whilst in Hated in the Nation, the bees aren't that significant, they're just there to set up the world, and then that's about it. As I said, the History of Bees uses them a lot because, one of the characters is a bee researcher, one's a bee farmer, and one's just a bee fanatic, so they're all obsessed.
Bee fanatic, let's go.
Anyway, in summary, both texts are able to use the same symbol, the bee, to tell vastly different stories with almost opposite tones and themes. So it's, very interesting. Anyway,
nice.
Tyrell, would you like to talk us through your stories?
No, thank you. I'm joking. Alright, so let's talk about In Order to Live. Now, In Order to Live it's an autobiography by this North Korean girl by Yeonmi Park. Now, she was born in North Korea, and this details life and struggles through going to North Korea, and detailing her life in China, then South Korea, then in America. But I'll only be talking about what happened in North Korea because it relates most
to 1984.
Yeah. So pretty much, so in her earliest, like in her early parts of life, right, pretty much from when she was born to, let's say, 10, she grew up quite wealthy for a North Korean. Well, wealthy, I say, they're not starving to death.
Which is good for North Korea.
Yeah, you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which and the only reason why they were wealthy was because their dad was selling things on the black market, like small things like clothes and electronics, and all that stuff was illegal in North Korea. And then as the story went on for a little bit more, the father was selling other things like rare metals and all that stuff from Pyongyang, and smuggling it through Kim Jong Il's actual personal train car himself, because no one looked in there.
Wow.
And then it's actually quite interesting how he did it, and then getting it to China.
That does sound interesting.
Yeah. But then after that, the father gets caught and gets to put in a felony prison camp.
Oh no.
Yeah. oh no.
Go on, keep going.
No. He gets put in a felony prison camp. They're horrible. They torture him, and they pretty much break him at the end, making him subservient to the to the state.
Yeah, of course.
It's just now they're poor. When the father's in prison, they're very, very poor. And their status is also lower. They are now considered criminals themselves, because father's a criminal.
Yeah.
And it's just group guilt for you. But anyway, they're starving, and they're probably deciding on a couple bugs a day that they found in the fields, and probably half a cup of rice.
So that does sound a lot like 1984 from what I know about it.
Yeah. The starvation got so bad that her skin started falling off because of a vitamin deficiency.
Goodness.
Yeah, and the only way, as I said earlier, that they would get protein was that they would eat bugs. Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah.
So let's talk about 1984.
Yeah, so how do they link?
So I'll just run through what 1984 is about, then I'll talk about how they're similar and how they link.
Go ahead.
Winston Smith, he works in the Ministry of Truth, and he rewrites historical documents and newspaper articles in accordance of the new dictionary. They're trying to get the dictionary as small as possible to get rid of any new words or any words at all that could defy the state.
Yeah.
So their dictionary was like that thick.
Wow, okay, that's quite thick.
I'm
kidding.
Like I don't know, like half an inch.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then he starts being cynical about what's happening around the place, because he's reading a lot about, I would assume it was because he's reading a lot about, he's just rewriting stuff and just trying to get rid of that, and he's just becoming cynical. And there's a thing called the thought police, which just if you think something bad about Big Brother, which is the government, they'll pretty much come after you, and
goodness,
and they'll come after you and do all kinds of horrible things.
Yeah.
So the thought police break him and make him believe, just to show how subservient people can be, they make him believe that 2 + 2 = 5.
Wait, it doesn't? No, go on.
They make him believe that, and they break him in the end. There's some other things that there's similarities that I haven't talked about yet, in in order to live, they have constant and in order to live, and in 1984 they have constant propaganda playing in the background. So in North Korea, you cannot turn off the radio.
Yeah.
It's always playing in the background. So if you turn it off, you get shot pretty much.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. You can lower the volume, but it's always playing in the background.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah. And in 1984, that they have these things called telescreens, which are just like, they didn't have like televisions when it was written.
Yeah.
But but you can't turn them off either. It's just the lack of food as well.
That's quite an interesting comparison, actually.
Yeah. In 1980, and also the lack of food as well. But in 1984, it was all rationed and given out by the government in North Korea. Yeah, you had to pretty much. It was a lot worse in North Korea. You had to actually get your food like yourself, and you didn't have enough money to get food.
Wow. Okay, that's not good.
Yeah. And how they break and torture people as well. So like with the father, right? He was tortured and kept in a prison camp, and he was made to be subservient to Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
And don't betray the government, and he was a broken man when he got released early. Well, he was released early because he was sick, but it's not important. Then in 1984, he was broken to believe like the most absurd things, as I told you, 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah, so they are quite similar then.
Yeah, so they're breaking people just to go for the government. It's just amazes me how similar they are, because like 1984 was written before North Korea was even a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
It was just, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Right, so that's pretty much everything.
Cool.
From me.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah, if you want you got any questions?
Ooh, nothing comes to mind, but I really did enjoy the comparison you made between the two.
Yeah.
Especially the one about the telescreens and the radio.
Yeah. It's just, I think like Kim Sung, what's his name? Kim Sung-il? Yeah. Kim Sung-il I think he probably read 1984 because
so that's a good idea.
Yeah, because Jesus Christ, they're like their lives just seem so like I can't believe that comparison between it's just so interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, constant propaganda playing, can't turn it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's about all the time we have for this episode of the JaiRell Experience. Don't forget about our sponsor, mybraincells.cf.
Yeah, make sure to go check them out.
A website with some hilariously funny jokes.
I've written some of the jokes myself.
Yeah, I personally love the website. That's mybraincells.cf.
Yeah,
enjoy.
check it out. Thank you.